Hello and welcome back to another SwansCast match preview, where this week, ahead of Swansea's home match against Norwich, I am joined by Connor from the PinkUn podcast, I want to say, or contributes there. But I'm sure Connor will let us know a little bit more about that one, because you might not make the connection about, a pink-based podcast in Norwich. But Connor, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, so the PinkUn is there's a bit of history involved, but essentially I work for the local newspaper covering Norwich City as chief Norwich City reporter. So the papers are the Eastern Daily Press, which obviously covers the East region really, and the Norwich Evening News, which is obviously a little bit more specific to Norwich. And in years gone by, they used to have the sports supplement, the Pullout, which was printed on pink paper, and so it got known as the PinkUn, and that's kind of stuck. And yeah, that's the reason why a Norwich City news channel is known as the PinkUn. So that's quite an interesting backstory, and I still have people come up to me now telling me about how they used to read the PinkUn in those good old days. Sadly, it's a little bit different of a print climate now, but yeah, we've kept the name, so that's good.
Yeah, I definitely was curious myself when I obviously was looking into the channel, and being Norwich based, you just expect a bit more green and yellow. But maybe if anyone ever sees a Norwich away kit and it's pink, there'll be a little bit more. Oh, actually, maybe that means something.
Yeah, I think they've avoided pink, sadly. Yeah, but
Need to get
hopefully
in
we see the
touch.
pink one at some point. Yeah, maybe we should. Yeah.
Get a third kit on the go. It's got a little bit of background. But yeah, so Norwich City are going to visit the Swansea.com stadium on the 4th of October, a Wednesday evening kickoff. Unfortunately, I was hoping to go, but it happens to be somebody in my family's birthday. How rude. So I can't get out of it, unfortunately. So I'm not going to make it, but I'm hoping to get back in time to at least watch it somewhere. But are you going to make the long trip down?
Yes, I am. We cover Norwich home and away. So I did Plymouth a couple of weeks ago, and now we've got Swansea 10 days later. So a really long trip for us. I think there's someone at the EFL who really dislikes Norwich City having to make us do long trip. We've got Middlesbrough as well later on in a midweek. So that's probably 3 of the 4 longest trips.
Yeah.
Maybe barring Sunderland that are in midweek. So yeah, coming down, but I always like coming down to Swansea. So really looking forward to it. It reminds me of Norwich actually in a lot of ways, that the way that the sort of stadium is set up and whatnot.
I was going to say, you're probably quite similar to us in the fact that you're in the far corner and you've got to go to quite far to get to a lot of the grounds for the away trips. But yeah, I normally love the midweek ones because of my work. It's more opportunity for me to go to them, but yeah, just the one time there's a midweek one I can go to, but I actually can't. But I am going. You said you went to Plymouth. I'm going to Plymouth on Saturday, so I'll make up for it with a nice long journey to the south coast. But let's get into the football then. So we're getting a little bit into the season, so I might have to change some of these questions up soon, but I think they're still relevant. I usually ask for a little bit of an introduction to your club then, so Norwich City, and how your summer's gone, avoiding transfers. Has there been any big change at the club? So whether that's management, board, any structural changes that are worth mentioning ahead of the game?
Yeah, quite a few. I think that's worth mentioning. One that happened slightly earlier in the summer was sporting director Stuart Webber, who has obviously built 2 championship winning football teams at Norwich City in years gone by. Was the guy really who kind of headed up the recruitment and whatnot in both of those seasons under Daniel Farker. Obviously not quite as successful at Premier League level, but it was announced that he had submitted his resignation. That actually came back in March. So Norwich are now in the process of recruiting for a new sporting director. He's still in post as it stands, but it looks like they're getting closer now to an appointment. So I think we're probably in the final days of his kind of reign at the football club. And then just yesterday, actually, Monday, we're obviously recording this Tuesday night, there was a meeting for shareholders to approve some sort of more influence from an American businessman who's kind of dipped their toe in the water of Norwich City in the last year or so, called Mark Attanasio. So any baseball fans out there, he's the owner of Milwaukee Brewers, and he first got involved in 2022, and just now a vote has been passed by shareholders, which will essentially begin a process that will see him join Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones in holding 40% of the club. So it kind of ends a 26-year reign of Delia Smith and her husband's sole stewardship of the club, and Norwich go from being majority shareholder owned to having joint minority shareholders because none of them own more than 50% of the club. So yeah, it's been quite a few months of change, and I think we're anticipating more change in the months to come with the sporting director and whatnot. And yeah, probably not the most stable. I think the external view of Norwich City is always that it's quite a stable club, and maybe at the moment that image is being rocked a little bit.
Yeah, I would have suggested stability. It looked like you were making good use of bouncing up and down between the Premier League and the Championship, and not overdoing yourself with the spend when you went up, but being in a position where when you came down you could challenge to go back up. So yeah, I mean, I guess change always happens at some point. Swansea obviously went through it, I want to say 5-6 years ago now, with the we had American owners buying us out as well, so we have some sort of recognition of that aspect. But it sounds like potentially yours is a bit more positive a little bit with the investment at the moment. I mean, if that's fair to say, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's been quite a cautious approach so far, which has been good. You tend to see with these American takeovers that sometimes they can jump in with both feet and it doesn't work because they don't have a grasp of the business, and it's a completely different world that they're walking into. And it's all of them have dreams of Premier League of the Premier League, and then it's kind of what happens if you don't get there. And the fact that maybe there's not that understanding that football, you don't really make profit or money from football, and all of this can be quite testing. So it's been good because I think Norwich have been searching for a long time for someone who will align with what they want to do, and they found that in Mark Attanasio. He's someone that wants to invest in infrastructure and people rather than someone who's just going to sign checks and kind of wave all their problems away. That being said, he is, as part of this deal, going to be giving them £33 million debt repayment, so that there is a real important aspect to it. But I think the cautious approach is good. There's also an agreement between the two parties that for the next 3 years he will vote in lockstep with Delia and Michael. So essentially Delia will kind of remain the decision maker, so to speak. And I think what we're getting at is a transitional moment. They see someone who's worked in the game for nearly 30 years, two people, and see them as really valuable to learn off. And whilst by their own admission they don't know too much about football, so I think it's just a process to maybe help them understand that. And the cautious approach, I think, is probably the right one.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of cautious approach and potentially not waving the checks around, moving on to your summer window, because it's been a relatively good start to the season, I would suggest, looking from the outside. Have any new signings happened over the summer, or incomings and outgoings that are notable, that have allowed you to potentially start the season in a sort of strong position?
Yeah, I think from an incoming perspective, there's been a real shift in strategy at Norwich City this summer. David Wagner came in. He had a really poor end to last season. It was one win in 11 that they concluded the championship campaign with. That basically killed their any sort of outside hopes of getting into the playoffs. And obviously in that run was obviously Swansea's 3-0 victory at Carrow Road. So Russell Martin, of course, enjoyed that one. And I think the acceptance was that they needed a bit more mentality. And whenever I hear mentality, you kind of expecting older, more experienced heads to come in the building. And that's exactly what we saw. Since Stuart Webber's been at the club since 2017, they hadn't signed a single outfield player over the age of 30. They signed 5 this summer, with 2 more who are going to be 30 by the end of the year. So it's been a real shift in strategy. They've tried to get more experience into the group, tried to balance it off. They had quite a young group anyway, and there's a real reliance on kind of pushing players through the academy because of their financial model. So I think the idea is just to try and make them a little bit more competitive. That's worked, I would say. They've been a bit more uncomfortable to play against, barring what was a really horrific day in Plymouth a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, it's probably allowed them to start pretty fast because they've signed players who have a lot of appearances at this level, and there hasn't necessarily been that need for adaptation as maybe there was in years gone by where they've signed players from really different markets. So mentality has kind of been the buzzword. That's been what they've been looking for and what they've been recruiting to. And I think we've seen that. From an outgoing perspective, it was about raising funds. I mentioned obviously the debt repayment that that Mark Atanasio has contributed to the club. The reason for that is the club, after relegation, took out £66 million worth of loans against parachute payments or future earnings if they got back to the Premier League. So they had to raise the other 30 million essentially, and they did that by selling Max Aarons to Bournemouth and Andrew Mamoudelli to Nottingham Forest, and Milo Rashica, who wasn't at Norwich last year but was out on loan at Galatasaray. He went to Besiktas. So they kind of raised funds in that way. So a focus on raising funds and trying to sign players for not much, to be completely honest, and trying to remain competitive. And I think certainly off the basis of the first 9 games, it looks like they've achieved that.
Yeah. Do you think one more that you didn't mention, I just want to ask about Timo Pukki. Is that a big loss or somebody that was maybe past the peak?
Yeah, really interesting one, because I think by common consensus last season, it was a really difficult year for him. And there's a load of reasons why that isn't his fault. He was playing in a Dean Smith team that struggled to attack, a team that wasn't particularly great. And so he didn't shine in the same way. It wasn't a team that was built for him in the same way as Daniel Farke's sides, where he would rack up 30 plus goals. He'd been top scorer in all of the campaigns previously at Norwich City, barring the last one where it was Josh Sargent. So I think it probably felt like the right time, and it probably felt like it had to happen both for him and for Norwich, who would have loved to have kept him by all accounts. And what we've seen actually this year is some players step up and take a little bit more of the goal scoring burden, which was required, because there's been such an over reliance on Teemu Pukki to score goals at Norwich City over the last 5 years or so. So we've seen those guys, they're top scorers in the division at the moment. And they've shared those goals around really nicely. John Rowe has 6, and beyond that, they've been able to share them around. So it probably was the right time. It was a sad day though, because he's an absolute legend at the football club. He's their third, he's their fourth all-time goal scorer, which documents his contribution really, and significantly less appearances than the top 3 managed as well. So a remarkable talent, but probably in hindsight, even though it didn't necessarily feel like it at the time, probably was the right time to go.
Yeah. And sorry, there's just one more player, again, that I'm surprised maybe has fallen off from where he was a couple of seasons ago and has left on a free, and that's Todd Cantwell. So what's gone on there? Because it looked like a few seasons ago that he was going to be maybe the next big thing.
And that was the question that everyone of a Norwich persuasion was asking themselves, really. Again, probably the right time. He's a local lad. He grew up in Dereham, which is not far outside Norwich, really. It's kind of a village within Norfolk, but about a 20-minute drive from where I live, and I'm sort of South Norwich, so it's not a million miles away. And I think in the end, there was kind of relationship breakdowns with various people and chances given and maybe not taken, and probably just felt like he needed a fresh start more than anything, and he needed to get out of Norfolk and needed to get out of maybe the Goldfish Bowl, really. And he's obviously gone up to Scotland and done pretty well by all accounts. He's very popular up there, so everyone's really pleased for him. I'm certainly really pleased for him. I'd say he probably gets quite a mixed reaction here now, understandably, but certainly considering how he kind of burst onto the scene in that Premier League campaign, it is a little bit disappointing that he wasn't quite able to maintain that for various reasons. And part of that doesn't get often a lot is because of how good Emi Buendia was the following season. So there's loads and loads of reasons, but in the end it was similar. He just needed to get away from the football club, and actually I think as we've all seen, it's really benefited his career to go up there.
Okay, so a lot of change anyway in the summer that we've been discussing so far. So how's that translated on the pitch, and what sort of style did Norwich kind of show these days?
Yeah, well, it's as I said, I think it's definitely been a change of approach. David Wagner's teams try and be high octane. They want to play with energy. They want to be aggressive. He wants them to be really strong at as a counter pressing unit. But I think what's been clear more than anything else is they're pretty all round. To be honest, if teams come and press them and go high, they're happy to clip it longer. If teams sit off, then they'll play it shorter and they'll build up in a slower fashion. If there's a transitional moment and they try and create that, you'll see it tomorrow night, no doubt, when Norwich have the ball with their goalkeeper or their 2 centre-backs. You'll see, and you can watch out for this, just those players rolling their studs across the top of the ball, just trying to invite a press from the opponents to basically try and create a bit of a transitional opportunity. basically like a counter-attacking scenario. That's the aim. They have a bit of problems when teams don't buy that, and they have to then build up a little bit slower. But that's one to look out for. But yeah, I'd say they're pretty well round. They haven't been that great. They've been pretty susceptible to pace and counter attacks because the centre back duo that they've gone for this season is Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson. Neither players are blessed with pace, shall we say, and they want to push their fullbacks so high, so that leaves space in wide areas as well. So there's vulnerabilities there, but as a team, they're happy to adapt really to situations and to try and I guess play the way that the game that they're playing kind of dictates to, and they've shown so far that they're pretty adept at doing that on the whole.
Well, I know Michael Duff's ultimate aim is to have a good press in the system. We haven't seen an awful lot of it working to the extent that it worked at Barnsley last year yet, but maybe if they're inviting it on, we'll see a bit of it. Whether it works well for us or well for you, I guess remains to be seen tomorrow. We did have a long-term injury to Josh Janelli recently, which cost us quite a bit of our pace, which is a bit sad to hear if that's maybe one of your big weaknesses there. But I'd imagine Jamal Lowe will maybe be the person used to try and exploit that. Whether we can get him in to areas that actually matter is the question, I guess, isn't it? So going into the game then, what's the formation you expect to see and any key players that will be included that we should watch out for?
Yeah, formation-wise, systems-wise, again, they're pretty fluid, but they've predominantly lined up in a 4-4-2, which has been quite interesting. They're without Josh Sargent and Ashley Barnes at the moment, who are their starting strikers. So I'd expect Adam Eder to be kind of the more advanced striker. And then on Saturday they played John Rowe in a more central role. He's been playing out wide as of late. They've got a South Korean striker called Hwang Yu-jo, who they signed on loan from Nottingham Forest, who could come in. And David Wagner's spoken about the need to make changes because of the schedule, and we all know what the Championship is like. So I wouldn't rule that out. And then, sorry, remind me of your second question.
Just key players that you expected to fit in. So just anyone that we really need to watch out for.
Gabriel Sara, I think, is the big one. He's, I think, take Leicester and their embarrassment of riches out of it. He is, for me, the best number 8, best midfielder in the division. So much quality, brilliant at timing runs into the box, a goal threat from kind of all areas, but really good engine, really good left foot, just a very, very good footballer to watch. He's quite atypical for a Brazilian because he's not this skillful player that maybe, if we sit back and close our eyes and think of Brazilian footballers, you think of Ronaldinho and all of those types. He's not quite that, but he is. He's got really good kind of British attributes to him that's made him quite successful in the Championship. And yeah, the only thing I would say about him is he's at his best when Norwich create a structure to allow him to flourish and they keep feeding him the ball. He's not a player who we've seen much kind of grab the game when it's kind of going away from them. So that's worth noting. John Rowe, I guess, is the other. He's been one of the success stories so far this season. Hadn't started a single game of senior football before the opening day against Hull, and has 6 goals in 9 games, and has been pretty prolific and just a really good character and personality. Really dynamic winger, possesses a real goal threat and capable of driving at people. Probably doesn't quite do that enough, but those are the 2 I think that most Norwich fans would say you need to look out for.
Definitely keep an eye on them. Gabriel Sara standing out quite heavily on the SofaScore statistics anyway, so I wasn't surprised to see that name pop up when you mentioned it there. Guess he's going to give Matt Grimes a good battle in the centre of the park, for sure. So I know you're saying you consider him the best outside of Leicester.
Yeah, I understand. Grimes is very good. Grimes is. I would maybe argue they're slightly different type of players.
Yeah, they are. I was only messing anyway. Yeah. I mean, you watch Sara a lot more, and we would say Grimes, but it's definitely club bias. I'm sure you get another club on you, and someone else is the Cardiff come down you and say Ramsey's the best, wouldn't they? So
yes, very true.
It's
very true.
It's just one of those. But moving on then, if I flip that last question on you a little bit and ask what key Swansea players would you be watching out for? I know we just mentioned one. Not sure if that's who you go for, but yeah, what key Swansea players worry you from a Norwich perspective?
Yeah, well, Grimes was going to be the big one. I think there was probably a bit of relief from the Championship, although he's obviously gone to Leeds, another club in the Championship, when Joel Perot left. I'm really intrigued by the Ukrainian striker that you guys have. I've heard some good things about him pre-Swansea, so I'm intrigued to watch him in the flesh. I mean, you mentioned Jamal Lowe as well. He's someone that Norwich City had on their shortlist in the summer as a potential striking option when they eventually signed Hwang. So well aware of his capabilities at this level as well. So I think there's a few players definitely to keep an eye out for, and I'm expecting a really interesting game. And I'm intrigued to see how it goes.
So Mikola Kuharovic scored his first goal for
us
in the last. Well, it took me a few podcasts to get that right, and I'm not 100% sure it's quite there, but good effort, I like to say. But yeah, he scored his first goal for us in the last game, coming off the bench, scoring a header against Preston, I want to say it was. No, Millwall, sorry, not Preston, it was Millwall. I've been, in my defence, a week in France for the Rugby World Cup, so a little bit blurry for the last two games because I wasn't able to watch them based on the fact I was watching the rugby.
I just throw in there. I don't blame you at all. I just throw Charlie Patino in there as well. I mean, he's someone who's sounds like he's had a really good start to life at Swansea, and not a particular surprise given the way you guys want to play football predominantly. I know Michael Duff has changed it slightly, and he's not as possession heavy as Russell Martin, but just a brilliantly technical footballer. So no surprise to me to see him getting the rave reviews that he's getting at the moment.
Yeah, and he's become a really big fan favourite in his short time here so far as well. Going to be one of them loan signings that you get to attach to, I think, and breaks your heart a little bit. But yeah, he's done really well for us, so I'm hoping that he does start the game. My point was going to be, I don't expect to see Kuharovic start the game. That's what I was getting to, but potentially will come on second half, I'd imagine. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, Jamal Lowe and Mac Rhymes for sure, I would think will be in the lineup. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I've got to ask in regards to the match. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a prediction of how you see it going before we finish.
Yeah, Norwich are very, very difficult. They won on Saturday. So they got beat 6-2 at Plymouth. They were as bad as bad can be. Really, you can use any adjective, and it wouldn't be too harsh as to reflect how poorly they played. And they obviously had to produce a response at Carrow Road on Saturday, which was kind of threatening to turn a little bit, which is quite interesting at this early stage of the season. I've in my head feel like this is going to be a tough one, a really tough one for Norwich City. Just the type of game, the form that you guys are in, back-to-back 3-0 wins. So in my head, I feel like it might be a defeat for Norwich, to be honest. Maybe 2-1 or something like that. But I'm going to be more optimistic, and I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. I think there'll be goals. Famous last words. So that's what I'm going to go for.
It's quite interesting to hear you speak of Swansea being in good form, because you would never guess it from half of our fan base. Yeah. Even though we've had the back-to-back 3-0 wins, the agenda's been a little bit of, well, it's only Sheffield Wednesday, and Millwall aren't going to do nothing special either. But it's been a bit of a ropey start under Duff, and some of the comments he made in the press have not brought everyone on side. So I think he's just got a bit of a job to work everyone back on side. And after the Cardiff result and the Bristol City result before that, these good results are even getting masked a bit from the bitter taste that came before. But I would say definitely the two previous results have shown a lot of improvement to where we were before. And I would hope that we can continue that, obviously with another home match now. It'd be good to not lose the game. I think Norwich are in a good position in the league. Tricky match. Obviously you want to win it. If we can draw it, I would still take that. From where we are at the start of the season, I would take a 2-2. Going away then to Plymouth on Saturday, another tricky one. Morgan Whittaker reunion. I know you know all about him after that game that you just mentioned. But
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's brilliant. The last question I do like to ask is not football related, but when you do go to any stadium, what would be your favourite pint to have a drink if you could choose?
I'm going to give you a not very good answer here. I don't drink, to be honest. So for me,
that's fine. It could be a soft drink or a coffee.
I'd go for a lovely cup of tea. That would be my choice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favourite tea bag then?
Oh, just standard. I'm good for a Yorkshire tea, but to be honest, I'm not fussy. Just anything that's, as long as it's quite strong and just a dash of milk, I'm really happy with
Any
that.
sugars in there then?
I'm sweet enough. So
There we
so
are.
no sugars, but
There we
yeah,
go.
nice strong cup of tea. You can't beat it.
So what do you think of Connor's tea order? Let us know in the comments and tell us if he's wrong and what he should be having instead when he's on match days. But no, everyone has their own choice of drink. I'm partial to a cider, but if I was going to go hot beverage, definitely a coffee for me. I'm a coffee man, so I do like a cup of tea, but generally it's a coffee. But yeah, there we go. Thanks for joining me, Connor. If you want to remind everyone where they can find any of your content, if they wanted to catch up with anything ahead of the match. I know this is quite last minute going out, but if they got a bit of time.
Yeah, well, all of my work is you can get via PinkUn.com, or there is we've got a podcast, and we've got a YouTube channel as well. The same, if you type in PinkUn, you'll find us, and obviously on all of the social media platforms as well. So that's the best place to go.
Yeah, and they'll be linked underneath in the description, as well as Connor's Twitter if you want to go and follow him for any of his views on football and Norwich City. So thank you very much for joining me again, Connor. Let us know in the comments what you think about all the stuff we learned about Norwich City today and what you think the score is going to be tomorrow night. We'll be recording this, as Connor mentioned earlier, on Tuesday evening. And yeah, hopefully Swansea get a good win. But then after that, good luck for the rest of your season.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. Thanks for having me on. You too.
That's all right. Maybe catch you again later in the season as well.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much, and see you in the next one.